This September, PV Magazine held its second Future PV Roundtable in the United States, concurrent with the Solar Power International Trade Show. We looked at the development of solar technology from the module level to the grid scale. A wide variety of technologies were explored, including bifacial cells and modules, half-cut cells, multi-wire, and novel interconnection technologies. And many who attended came with specific questions about how the market is changing.
Is poly dead? And the reason I'm asking that question is because the price merged 3 months ago between poly and mono. And that's sort of not happened before. And, poly had a more volume process than mono, but you guys have certainly changed the marketplace in mono. So what's going on here? Are we going to see this vast change of cells?
Yeah, I think LONGi has played a very important role driving down that mono cost, right? So together, I think there's a number I can share. Together, I think beginning of this year when we announced we have a product capacity increase to 45 gigawatt by 2020, we also announced by that time non-silicon cost for each mono wafer going to be less than 1 RMB, right? Which means it's 16 cents and per piece, non-silicon cost on the mono wafer. That translates into, about 3 cents per watt. And with that cost, I think it's going to be very competitive to any the module level, because mono offers higher efficiency and higher output.
In addition to these big picture market questions, there were also questions about the rate and process of the deployment of novel technologies.
Are you seeing some of these novel designs, metal wrap through this multi-wire, are these coming out of the pilot production stage into mass production yet?
No. Sorry, that was tongue in cheek. I think.
But where is mass production starting? Like, what do you consider mass production in terms of volume?
Hundreds of megawatts.
Okay,
I think
a gigawatt.
I think for some, if you go to most booths now have multi-bus bar, they have half cut, they might have a shingled cell, they have a bifacial, they have a glass on glass, mono perk. They have 10 different SKUs, if you will. But I think they've produced at least one of those modules because it's at the show, but they're not offering it yet. But it's to hint at things to come. I don't think it's wrong to display it and say, hey, this is in our roadmap, our 2019 roadmap.
Some products are farther along than others and are already beginning to make an entry into the market.
Every single major IPPs, utility developers are pulling bifacial modules, at least for some scale of field testing, right? Some customers are even committing more than, 100 megawatt projects on the bifacial.
The second part of the roundtable focused on our evolving understanding of integrating high levels of renewable energy on electric grids. And here we addressed how this is progressing not only in theory, but in the real world as well.
California's got about 20% solar on the grid, energy on an annual basis, about 10% wind, and we're having significant negative pricing events, throughout the spring. We're having significant curtailment already. So how do we get from the theory of the high levels of renewable energy to the practice, and what are the sticking points, the big ones in your minds?
So in power systems, you need to always have two things, power and energy. It may seem obvious, but actually power is important because that's instantaneously meeting the demand to be equal to the power. So we can certainly have 100% of the energy coming from renewables, except that they don't necessarily meet the demand. Okay? So theoretically, one can say, hey, I would just store whatever electrons I generate whenever the sun is shining or the wind is blowing. And by the way, then use the storage whenever you need it. And that theoretically is true. If you go to a small island or an offshore site, that's what will happen. So the question is, why wouldn't we do that? Well, it's very simply the following. If I generate electricity at 3 cents per kilowatt hour, and I shove that kilowatt hour into the storage, and I add 10 more cents to that, and I say, hey, how about 17 cent electricity? Oh, sorry, 13 cent. I'm forgetting my arithmetic, but 13 cents electricity. Would you like that? Now, if you can, on the other hand, generate from natural gas at 6 cents, 5 cents, would you rather do that versus store it? And I think economically, it's harder to argue that you would store that, even though that's the answer. So really what we have to look for all the time is how do we create flexibility in a sense that if I'm generating electricity at 3 cents per kilowatt hour, how do I get a demand response where all the cars are being charged at that time so that they can absorb excess energy? And that's the kind of flexibility that we should be looking for, because that car charging at 3 cents is much cheaper than me trying to store their electricity in storage and then feeding it in the evening time when they need it.
This conversation also included a lively discussion of the value and role of behind-the-meter resources.
What about behind the meter? So there's gigawatts in California of DG of varying sizes. How does that play into the plan for creating grid flexibility, integration of large penetration, et cetera, et cetera?
You mean solar specifically or all?
Keep it solar and storage.
Okay.
At this DG
Sure. Well, I think it's really important to align the price signals that customers are getting through rate design with the reality on the grid of when energy is more valuable. And net energy metering with flat volumetric rates is not that in the long term as we get more wind and solar penetration on the grid. So I would say that there is, I mean, we can disagree about where it is, but there is a ceiling on where there's a diminishing marginal return on the value of solar unless you can move it with the rotation of the Earth, which doesn't seem like it's. I didn't see anyone on the expo floor trying to do that. So, so I think making sure that those price signals are aligned is important. The second thing I would say is that as customers add storage behind the meter, again, just making sure that the rate designs can be flexible enough to reflect the changing conditions on the grid, so that storage isn't doing the same thing over and over again over 20 years, but instead can react to what's needed. And the third thing is these resources with smart inverters can provide grid services at the distribution level, like voltage management and conservation, and potentially reducing local capacity needs. And so I think that making sure that those value streams are available to those to reflect their potentially greater value is important to getting them deployed where they're most valuable.
In the end, whether at the cell level or the grid level, the evolution of technology plays a vital role, and we will continue to track these developments.
I really focus on the technology, innovation, and collaboration. This is a particular, I think, variable for this whole industry. In particular, right now we are on a transition for industry because I think a few panelists already mentioned, in order to really have this PV industry going to sustainable business and industry, technology play a very, very important role.